Last weekend, SpaceX launched first ever very rich space tourist to International Space Station, making history in doing so. It has changed definition, broadened the meaning of space travel and space tourism. Very rich tourists paid $55 million each to visit ISS and stay at International Space Station for up to 10 days. This is not the first time space tourists visited International Space Station. That honor falls on Dennis Tito, who in 2001 did the same feat by visiting International Space Station, paying only $20 million for the privilege. Dennis Tito spent a whole week at International Space Station and thus became very first space tourist. The fact SpaceX managed to achieve the same feat with 4 paying tourists some 20 years later isn't really a big feat, to be honest, but it is important as it demonstrates SpaceX's ability to mount purely non-commercial vehicle dedicated specifically to space travel. The fact the price is relatively steep at $55 million per person isn't important at this point, as the exposure SpaceX gets by achieving this milestone. No doubt when SpaceX starts launching Starship to International Space Station, and this also includes dedicated space tourists, cost of visiting International Space Station will drastically go down, perhaps as little as $500,000 per tourist for 3, 4 or 5 day stay at ISS Axiom module. And these sort of trips could happen as early as 2024, when Yasuko Azawa becomes first paying tourist who, along with a number of his friends, will do a space trip of a lifetime around the moon. And there's also talk the crew of the first Starship will also stay at ISS, making this most memorable trip an experience for the crew, no doubt. It is important to note, however, success of Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic and their attempts to bring space closer to average person. However, SpaceX is far bolder in its approach. Why only go 80 or 100 kilometer orbit when people can literally go to the moon? And who knows, in not too distant future, Mars or even Venus. The mission by US commercial aerospace company Axiom Space is a major step forward in private space travel and is part of a plan to build a private space station. With Russia recently pulling out of cooperating with the International Space Station, the world will be watching to see whether the private sector can be trusted to provide reliable access to space for peaceful exploration. The Axiom 1 mission has been a plan since the funding of Axiom Space in 2016 by Iranian-born American businessman Kamal Ghaffarian, who also founded the private nuclear reactor company X Energy, and Michael T. Suffardini, who had a long career at NASA. And while NASA is funding some of the cost, each of the 4 participants is reportedly having to provide their own contribution of $55 million. The onboard astronauts will feel weightless for a majority of the 10 days and be at risk from the dangers experienced by all astronauts, including radiation exposure, muscle degeneration, and potentially some bone loss. Although with such a short mission, these risks are exceptionally low. Unlike standard American trips to International Space Station, mission control is in Axiom headquarters in Houston, rather than on NASA property. While this is the first time it has been used for full mission, it has previously been used for research looking at how items on the ISS change over time. The resulted in Mission Control Center Axiom being validated as a payload operation site by NASA. Axiom future mission envisions expansion of ISS with Axiom Space Hotel module, which would allow for space tourists to stay on board ISS without being a burden to ISS crew. Eventually, Axiom Space plans to build private space station by adding modules to International Space Station, initially building a habitation module, Axiom Hub 1, which is estimated for launch in 2024. No doubt once operational, this module will accommodate and join with more modules as funding comes in for the company. With the ISS planned for decommissioning sometimes after 2030, it is quite possible Axiom would generate enough revenue from space tourism to afford to pay rent to European Space Agency and NASA to maintain ISS well into 2050s. A lot of private firms will be watching the AX-1 mission to make decision on whether to pursue their own programs. Success would mean that there could be suddenly an influx of investment and plans for future space stations, modules, or entire stations. So this rather small step for SpaceX could be a huge leap for humanity in space.
If you like this video, please press like and consider subscribing. Thank you.